Hey guys, it's Miss Barry. I wanted to go over a couple topics that are going to be on your test coming up on Wednesday, which I know you're super excited about. Just really quickly, I'm going to go through these rather fast, but with the video you'll be able to pause it or rewind if you need to. So the first thing we're going to look at is the angle addition postulate and the definition of angle bisectors. So for this first diagram, we've got the larger angle TEA. It's being bisected by ray EF, which will be information that's given to you. By definition of an angle bisector, you know that it's going to split this large angle into two equal parts. So those two smaller angles, TEF and FEA, will be congruent. And that's the first thing you can make a note of. And then because they're the same, if we're going to find out what each of those smaller angles are, other than just taking 70 and dividing it by 2, you could set each of those to x, and then set the measure of angle TEA to 2x, and then solve for x to find out that x is 35. And what you would do with that is say that the measure of angle TEF is 35, and measure of angle FEA is also 35. Okay. The next one, we're giving similar information. Ray BD bisects angle ABC. So here is ABC, there is our angle bisector. So again, by the definition of an angle bisector, those two angles are congruent. You're being asked to solve for x and then find the measure of ABD and the measure of angle DBC. And we'll go ahead and say what the measure of angle ABC is as well. Okay, now again, because that is a bisector, these are two equal angles, we can set those equal to each other. So we can just set it up as x equals 4x minus 30. When you go to solve for x, you can subtract 4x from each side. Again, because we're just solving like a regular equation, we want to get all the x's to one side and have numbers on the other. 1x minus a 4x would be negative 3x. And then on the other side, we just have that negative 30. Continue solving for x to find that x is equal to 10. And now to find the measure of angle ABD, that one is just x. So we could just plug that 10 in there and say that measure is 10 degrees. And then for the angle that's 4x minus 30, you could plug a 10 in there. So that would be like 4 times 10 minus 30, which also equals 10 degrees, which is what we wanted because those two angles should be the same. So that makes sense. And then angle ABC would be 10 plus 10, which would be 20 degrees. Okay. The next thing is going to target your angle pair skills. Let's say this one is 2y plus 4, 38, 3y minus 65, and this one is going to be 2x. Okay, you are being asked for this problem to find x and y. So to do that, you need to notice which pairs of angles would be supplementary, which ones might be congruent. And so here I'm talking about vertical angles in linear pairs, and that's going to help you solve for the variable. First off, I noticed that I do have one angle whose measure I have completely without variable, and that's 38 degrees. So you can go a couple of different ways. You could, you could notice that these two angles here are supplementary because they are a linear pair, they form that line. Or you could go straight across here and note that vertical angles are congruent. And I'm going to do that first. Because vertical angles are congruent, I'm going to set that 38 equal to 2x and solve for x. You need to find that 19 is equal to x. The next thing you could do is set 38 plus 3y minus 65 equal to 180 again because it's linear, or you could go with the 2y plus 4. Either way, you'll get the same answer. So 180 is going to be equal to 38 plus, I'm going to do the 2y plus 4. By doing that, I'm going to notice that 38 and 4 are like terms, so I'm going to combine those. It should be 42. And then I'm going to continue solving for y by first subtracting 42 from each side. I'm going to get 138 equals 2y. And then divide by 2 on both sides. And I would get that y is equal to 69. So now we've solved for x and y. Now that we have that, you could go in and plug in those values. Here we know that's 38. If you plugged in y here and here, you would get the same angle measure for both of those, which just proves that the vertical pairs are congruent. The last thing I want to show you is midpoint. And we'll start out where you've got both endpoints, and we will find the midpoint using the midpoint formula. So these are our two endpoints here, and you're being asked to find midpoint. First thing I'm going to do is write that formula out. So that's x1 plus x2 divided by 2. That's our x coordinate, and then our y coordinate for the midpoint is found by adding y1 and y2 and dividing by 2. So now I'm just going to plug in my values. x1, y1, that's my x2, y2. And then I'm going to plug those in. So my x1 would be 0. My x2 is a positive 4. I'll set that over 2. And then my y1 is a negative 4. My y2 is 0 over 2. And finally we would get 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Negative 4 plus 0 is negative 4. And negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. So that would be our midpoint. I'm going to use the same coordinates to do one of the problems where you have an endpoint and the midpoint, and you have to find the other midpoint. This is the one that has tripped you guys up a little bit. So I wanted to be sure and include one of those. So let's say that you're given this endpoint of 0, negative 4. And you're also given that the midpoint is 2, 2. Find other endpoint. I'm going to abbreviate that with EP. Okay. Back to our midpoint formula. x1 plus x2 over 2. y1 plus y2 over 2. Okay. What I'm going to do is label that first endpoint my x1, y1, because what we're going to do is plug those values into our formula and kind of solve for the other variables. Just like if you had x and y in the same equation, you solve for two different variables and you rearrange things or plug in what you know, and that's kind of what we're doing here. It's not any different. So I'm going to plug in my x1 value. 0 plus x2 divided by 2, and then my y1 value, which is negative 4, plus my y2 divided by 2, and I'm going to set that equal to my midpoint because this is the midpoint formula. And we've already been given what the midpoint is, and that is 2, -2. That's my x, that's my y. Okay, now what we're going to do is kind of break this formula apart into the x coordinate and the y coordinate. My x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is equal to that x coordinate of my midpoint. Because that's what we do up here when we solve for that. We get the x coordinate and the y coordinate by doing this formula. So I'm going to set this equal to 2 because that was the x coordinate of my midpoint. So the first thing you do to solve, and we're solving for the x2 by the way. So you can multiply both sides by 2, which would get rid of that. And you get that 0 plus x2 is equal to 4. So obviously x2 is going to be equal to 4. So there's 1. Now we're just going to do the same thing with our y coordinate. So y1, no, I'm sorry, -4 plus y2 divided by 2 is going to be equal to -2, because that's the y coordinate of our midpoint. Okay, again, like we did before, start out by multiplying both sides by 2, and then -4 plus y2 is -4, and you're going to find that y2 is equal to 0. So that means our other endpoint is 4, 0. And as you can see up here, that's what we started with for our other endpoint. So working it 2 separate ways, and we kind of get all the same information. Alright, hopefully that helped for some of you. Go back and look over this. You will have 2 of each of these type of questions on the test, so definitely know how to do that. And we will address more questions in class on Tuesday. Happy Labor Day!